Have you ever wondered why the voice in your head is so freaking mean? Like, why does it wake you up at 3 a.m. telling you that everything in your life is terrible? Is that adaptive somehow? Why does it tell you that you are not good enough? Why do you get stuck in cycles of endless mental chatter and stuck in shitty feeling emotional states like anxiety and anger and guilt and shame and envy? It turns out there is actually a reason. I dug into the research, and actually that voice and those negative emotions might be good for us if we use them correctly. And we have a lot more control over that voice and over those emotions than we might think. So I invited on the person leading all of that research, Dr. Ethan Kross. He's the director of the Emotion and Self-Control Lab at the University of Michigan, and he's the mega best-selling author of the books Chatter and Shift. Welcome to the Liz Moody Podcast. I'm Liz. I'm a longtime journalist. I love diving into the science, probing into your toughest problems, and uncovering real, actionable answers so that you can feel as good as possible every single day. Ethan, welcome to the podcast.
Well, it's a delight to be here with you, Liz.
My number one question is, why do I believe every bad thing anybody has ever said about me and none of the good things stick?
So there's actually a good reason for that. There's this one scientific paper that I absolutely love, and the title is Bad is Stronger Than Good. And what it speaks to is this widespread phenomenon that we are more sensitive to the negative things in life than the positive things. Now, there's a really good reason why we think that is. The bad stuff is going to, take us out. It's going to kill us. I didn't want to go there right away. The good stuff might feel good, but it doesn't have the same survival implications. One of the only Nobel Prizes awarded for psychological research really focuses on this phenomenon. If you've ever heard of the idea of loss aversion, we're more sensitive to losses than we are to gains. If we experience something negative, it looms much larger than the positive things in life. And I think just recognizing that can be really empowering for people because it can serve as a conscious reminder, oh, wait a second, things might not be as bad as they actually are. I'm just built to magnify them a bit.
Other than helping me not die, are there benefits to negative self-talk?
I'm of the belief that negative emotions, which often follow from negative self-talk, are useful. We have evolved the capacity to talk negatively to ourselves at times. You just screwed up. What's wrong with you? We've evolved the capacity to experience anger, sadness, shame, whatever negative emotions for a reason. They serve a function. So one of the things that I've often rallied against is this notion that we should strive to live lives free of all negativity. If that's a goal you're giving people, number one, I think you're giving them an impossible goal. Number two, you're giving them an undesirable goal. It's not good for them. And I'll give you a really powerful illustration of that. Do you like experiencing physical pain?
No.
Yeah, turns out I don't either. I know there's some people who do, but I think for the norm, we could say most people do not like physical pain. And so we might think, what would life be like if we never experienced physical pain? There is a small group of individuals every year, they're born into this world, and they're incapable of experiencing physical pain due to a genetic anomaly. And what happens to these kids is very sad. They end up dying young. They die young because they scratch a mosquito bite because it itches, and then they keep scratching it right after it becomes infected. Take anxiety. Do you like experiencing anxiety?
No, and it's something that I struggle a lot with.
You and many others, and we'll get into the difference between what healthy anxiety and unhealthy anxiety are in our conversation today. But anxiety, like all negative emotions, when it's experienced in the right proportions, not too intensely, and it doesn't last too long, it can be really, really good for us. When I think back to all the different presentations I've given over the course of my career, there's one that stands out to me. It was a total flop. It was a total flop because I experienced 0 butterflies in my stomach the evening before that engagement. So there was no cue inside me that was effectively saying, hey, maybe you should focus on what you're going to talk about tomorrow to make sure you're prepared. Why don't you think through what questions you might get from the audience so you have a good answer? I just rolled up, I started speaking, and it wasn't bad, but it just felt totally flat. Now, when I experience a little bit of anxiety before a big event, that motivates me to pay attention to something that matters. And that is a really good thing. So, to go back to your question about is negative self talk ever good? There are times I'm guessing, I don't know you very well, but I'm guessing you screw up at times. Fair to say? And when that happens, recognizing, oh, I just screwed up. That was a big mistake. Why the hell did I do that? I mean, that is a form of negative self talk. That can be a route to self insight, to learning lessons that allow you to move on. The difference between healthy negative self talk and the unhealthy version, which is what I call chatter, is when that negative inner monologue starts playing in a loop. So it's not just, oh, God damn it, you screwed up. It's, you screwed up. You're an idiot. Such an idiot. Why do you always do things? It becomes unproductive because it's not just a recognition that things aren't the way we hope and desire them to be. It's just harping on that continuously. And that predicts all sorts of negative outcomes.
Is there any reason why some thoughts get stuck in a loop and replay in our minds forever, and some we're like, oh, that was helpful, thank you, and we move on?
Well, the more attached we are to certain contexts, the more we care, the more we tend to immerse in those experiences. When you were a little kid and you experienced a problem, what did your parents tell you to do? Well, it's like roll up your sleeves, focus on the problem, get to the bottom of it, work through it. And so this is a very common lesson that we're taught by parents, by caretakers, by teachers, right? Like stare that problem in the face, get through it. But that's a very, very common response we have. So when we experience emotional challenges in our life, that's often the reflexive response we take. We just zoom in really narrowly to the exclusion of everything else that is happening. And once you zoom in very narrowly, you got the problem right there, but the emotions often come with it. And those emotions begin to flood us. We experience them intensely. And that makes it more challenging for us to maintain objectivity, the objectivity that we often need to think productively about our problem.
It feels so maladaptive to me, though, to be like, oh, the things that I care about the most are going to be the things that I fixate on to the point where I get in the way of my ability to actually make the thoughts or actions that I would need to get out of the situation. Similarly, you said with anxiety, like this can help you pay attention to things. My anxiety wakes me up at 3 a.m. and is like, you're really anxious about this podcast you have tomorrow. And then I don't get the sleep I need to perform well at the podcast.
Not today, though.
Not
about me.
I'm anxious before every podcast because I really want it to be a great experience for the guest. I want it to be a great experience for my listeners. I recognize the time everybody's putting into this.
Yeah.
Why are our emotions working in ways that are not conducive to the outcomes that we want?
I love that you said 3 a.m. For me, I'll get once a month. I call it 2 a.m. chatter. We could talk about why that happens in the middle of the night. That's really interesting and something that a lot of people struggle with. Emotions are blunt tools. They are really useful tools, but they can come on really strong. And because we are never taught how to wield those emotions, we often do so in ways that backfire on us. So my grandfather was a master carpenter. I've inherited none of his prowess with, his hands in that regard. But I remember one time he came over our house, he was remodeling our basement and he had his favorite hammer. I guess you develop,
Sure.
You have a favorite tool, right? And I'm a kid and I take the hammer and what do? I start banging it on the cement. The head goes flying off. And so, of course, I quickly got the head. I put it back on and put it down. And he then went to use it and broke something. It was not a great experience for us. I didn't know how to use that hammer. In my hands, that hammer was a source of destruction, right? It could even be a murder weapon. In his hands, it was a tool that he used to build homes where people live their lives. Emotions work similarly. We are not taught. They don't come with a user's manual for how to harness them. It's a lot like our bodies. You have a lot of knowledge about nutrition and about physical health. My wife is a nutritionist. If she wasn't a nutritionist and I never read a book on nutrition, I wouldn't know the difference between carbs and proteins and fats. and how to optimize the way I consume them to allow me to meet my goals, I'd probably be eating in ways, given like the opportunities available to us right now, that would lead me to have disease. McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, they taste really, really good, right? Because I have that knowledge, it impacts how I consume food. Exercise. Let's back up with exercise. Do you go to a gym or do you have a gym membership or have you in the past?
Yes.
Okay. So imagine you take a person who has never stepped foot in the gym and has no experience in that space. You put them in there with all these machines.
That was me like a year ago.
Okay,
and I was like, I don't know what to do with any of this.
What the hell do you do? And, you could try to start figuring it out. And guess what?
You'll get hurt.
You'll probably get hurt. But if you know how to use these machines, they can extend your life. And I fundamentally believe that the same is true when it comes to our emotions. So take anger as an example. Like anger is often described as a toxic emotion along with anxiety and sadness. Anger is a really, really useful emotion. When my daughter rides her bike without a helmet and I see it, like we don't do that in our house. That is something that can jeopardize her life. If she falls off, hits her head. I experience anger. What does anger as an emotion do? It motivates me to confront the situation, right? On my face, there's often a certain kind of anger display that is communicated to her. So she knows I'm not happy. And then it allows me to then fix this transgression of what is right versus wrong. When we experience anger, when our view of how things should work is violated. This is not how things work in our house, right? So no, we don't ride our bikes without helmets. I approach the situation. I communicate that to her. She doesn't do that again. Now that's a controlled anger response. Importantly, I'm not throwing things. I'm not cursing. I'm not sitting with the anger for months on end. My guess is you, because you're a living, breathing human being, you've probably sat with a negative emotion for longer than you wanted to at times in your life. Fair to say?
Yeah.
That is what takes a healthy emotional response, negative emotional response, and transforms it into a more unhealthy one. And that is often what chatter does. Chatter is this tendency to just get stuck in a negative thought loop about something that has happened to you or something that you imagine happening to you. And one of the things it does is it keeps those negative experiences active and alive. So people often say, stress kills. Be careful about stress. I like to point out that that's not actually true. The fact that you are capable of experiencing a stress response, this is a really good thing. You're walking down your street at night, you see someone who looks suspect, you immediately experience this fight or flight response. Like that has the potential to save you. And from a physical health point of view, there's nothing harmful about experiencing an acute stress response. What makes stress toxic from a physical health point of view is when that stress response activates and remains chronically activated over time. That exerts a wear and tear in your body that predicts things like problems of cardiovascular disease, inflammation, certain forms of cancer, all the boogeyman conditions, right? What keeps that stress response active? Chatter can do it because you keep replaying the situation in your head over and over. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if this happens? I can't believe I did that. Oh my God, they said this and they looked at me this way. And that keeps your body grinding away in ways that can be very damaging.
We're going to get into a lot of different tools to stop chatter, but can you just give us maybe one tool? What is your favorite way to stop chatter that is causing stress?
It's like asking me about my children. Which one do I like better?
Which one do you like better?
I don't. I love them both. So I don't have one go-to for myself. Most people don't have one go-to. We actually did these studies during the COVID pandemic where we wanted to see how are people managing their emotions, their anxiety surrounding COVID. And so we tracked people for, I think it was about 2 weeks. And every day we asked them to rate their level of COVID anxiety. And we also asked them to indicate which of 18 different strategies, different tools that they use. And what we found is that on average, people used a cocktail of tools, not alcoholic cocktail, you know what I mean, right? Like 4 or 5 different tools. That's true of me too. So when I'm experiencing stress, I have a go-to set of 3 tools that I use. I will use something called distanced self-talk. That's a zooming out tool or I will try to coach myself through a problem, give myself advice like I'm talking to one of my best friends, and I'll use language to help me do that. I'll actually refer to myself using my name and the second person pronoun you. Ethan, what do you think you should do here? Here's how I think you should manage the situation. We know that people, human beings, are much better at giving advice to others than taking that advice themselves. We're all giant hypocrites at some level, but what distant self-talk does is it plays on that mechanism. Most of the time we use words like you or a name. It's when we are thinking about and referring to someone else. So when you use those parts of speech to refer to yourself, it's effectively turning on the mental machinery for giving advice to someone else. Distant self-talk, I do that. Then I jump into my mental time travel machine and I really put it to work. So first I go into the future. I'll often sometimes do this with distant self-talk. I'll blend the tools. Ethan, how are you going to feel about this next week? Or next month? Or 5 years from now? Or when you're retired and playing with your grandkids. We call that temporal distancing or future mental time travel. It highlights the fact that what I'm going through right now, as awful as it is, it's temporary. It will eventually pass. I don't have to really convince myself of that. I just need to remind myself of that because I, along with everyone who is listening right now, has experienced millions of emotional reactions that follow that time course. We're living life, we experience an emotion, it elevates, and as time goes on, it eventually subsides. The vast majority of our emotional experience have that time course. Some take longer to come down than others, but this mental time travel machine we possess, it's flexible in terms of the coordinates. Tomorrow morning, next week, next year, 10 years. So that often turns the volume down on my chatter too. That one, by the way, is my absolute go-to for the 2 or 3 a.m. chatter. When my brain is effectively like turned off, the front part of my brain, I can't really think very rationally. I just say to myself, how am I going to feel about this tomorrow morning? At 3 a.m.
Everything feels like a world ender, I feel like.
World ender. I mean, it's like the job is gone.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's incarceration, death befalls me.
It is wild how differently your brain processes it's insane.
Real. It's terrible. And this for me, I mean, truly, this is a real example for me of the value of just being aware of these science-based tools because now that I have that tool in my toolbox, I just go for it reflexively. I don't get out of bed and do sleep hygiene. If sleep hygiene works for you or anyone else, keep doing it. I don't go downstairs and make a cup of tea and read in my office with dim lighting. I simply ask myself, how am I going to feel about this tomorrow morning?
And what if your 3 a.m. self says tomorrow morning you're going to be freaked out because your wife will have left you, you will have lost your job, you're unemployable, etc.?
That has never happened.
Okay.
Look, this is an N of 1. I'm talking about my own subjective experience here.
Yeah.
But once I am caffeinated in the morning and my wife is there as a resource, it doesn't mean the problem is gone, but it is heavily diminished. And all of those outlandish outcomes that at 3 a.m. seem possible, like this is not like reality. There's another situation though, which is sometimes like next year is a lot better than next morning, right? Like, so if it's something actively that I'm dealing with, sometimes recognizing like next year, no matter what, it's going to be done with. That can be even more helpful.
I have one more question about that, but then I'll bring you back to past. What if there is proof to the truth of what we're telling ourselves, either at 3 a.m. or anytime? Like, we are worried about AI taking our jobs, and we just read a report that AI took a bunch of jobs.
Sure.
We're worried about our partner cheating on us, and we just found a text that suggests they might be. What do we do if there's proof about the truth?
These tools that we're talking about don't take negative experiences and just turn them into cookies and sunshine. What they do is they have the potential to turn the volume down on these negative experiences to make them more manageable. And there is always the possibility of taking something that feels all-consuming and making it more manageable. One of the most impactful books I ever read, I was a sophomore in college. It was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. It's a classic. And here you've got a guy who just lost his entire family in the Holocaust, right? And he is able to find hope, not to minimize the kinds of things that we experience, but it's just a a fantastic reminder that there is always this choice we have to engage differently with our experiences.
So in the moment, if there's proof to the truth of the negative self-talk, are we just employing these tools to kind of remind us that people can get through anything?
We're employing these tools to allow us to work through this experience, to get on with our lives. There are lots of mistakes that you and I and everyone else on this planet have made. We've got to keep living. And the problem with chatter is you keep harping on those problems, whether they be in the past or anticipated in the future, or you're dealing with them right now, to the point where they take away from you living the life that you want to live. So, assuming your goal is to get back on with your life, these are tools that can help you do that by helping you look at these negative experiences differently.
Even if they're true.
Even if they're true.
Yeah.
Absolutely. These tools are not going to erase the scorecard of screw ups that is yours in your life, but hopefully they can allow you to come to terms with these events. In an ideal world, maybe learn from them, right? Most experiences we can learn from, we can reframe them. Doesn't mean we forget them, but their impact on us diminishes. And that's the real hope, is getting on with stuff. Keep going, keep moving.
Okay, so Viktor Frankl is actually a nice segue into time traveling backward as a tool.
Oh, yes. And that was my third. So thank you for reminding me. So mental time travel back is usually the last thing I do. I set my mental time travel machine for 1943, Eastern Poland. I spent some time with my grandparents who were fleeing from the Nazis right after their families were slaughtered. They lived homeless for several years in Poland while the Nazis were on their tails. I don't have to spend a lot of time hanging out with Bubby and Papa in Poland to very quickly realize that what I'm going through, as awful as it genuinely feels and seems right now, that pales in comparison to what they not only endured, but successfully lived through, came over to this country, had a wonderful life. And so that's just an incredible perspective broadener for me. And so that's a trio: distant self-talk, mental time travel into the future, mental time travel into the past. Sometimes doing those three once is enough to nip it in the bud. Sometimes I have to come back to them. Sometimes I've got to dig deeper into my toolbox. And the good news is that my toolbox is pretty complete. There are quite a bit of tools there.
You wield those better than the hammer of your youth.
I wield them much more successfully than the hammer of my youth. I interestingly still wield hammers.
Dangerously?
Ineffectively, dangerously, incompetently was the word I was looking for.
What's the difference between perspective making and gaslighting ourselves into thinking that our suffering isn't comparatively important? I'm just thinking about a lot of people who are like, yeah, like my situation's bad, but I have food on my table, so I don't get to feel bad about the situation that I'm in. Like, how do we know what's the right amount of bad to feel and what amount of bad we should be making these adjustments?
This is a fantastic question. I have always believed that your subjective experience is something that needs to be honored. And so, yes, we're sitting in a lovely studio right now in a beautiful part of the country, having a great conversation with protein drinks at arm's reach if we want them. Yeah. And there are other people who don't have these luxuries. But my guess is that you, working in this place, still experience intense negative emotions at times, like all people do. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, and I often feel guilty about them.
And you feel guilty for experiencing those. Let's come back to the guilt part. The fact that you still experience intense negative emotions, I mean, your brain is functioning similarly to people who are experiencing negative emotions in other less fortunate or more fortunate contexts. So this question of negative experience and how do we manage negative emotions, I describe it as a timeless and universal struggle. It is something that characterizes our species. It does not discriminate between rich and poor, educated and uneducated. We all have the capacity to experience these negative emotions at times quite intensely. And that's something I think we want to help all people try to manage.
So when I feel the guilt, is there a tool I should be employing in that situation?
You can normalize this experience. So normalization, recognizing that you are a human being and human beings experience negative emotions. The fact that you are experiencing something negative doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. The fact that you are a best-selling author with an amazing career doesn't mean that you are not allowed to experience negative emotions. Welcome to the human condition. We all do. So it's not something to feel guilt over. It's something to first and foremost embrace. And simply recognizing that, by the way, research shows can be really useful. For example, reinterpreting an anxiety response, not as, oh my God, my hands are sweating and my stomach's making noises that other people can hear about, but instead, holy cow, my body's like a Ferrari. It is revving up to prepare me for this really important situation that I'm in. Reinterpreting your negative emotions in that more adaptive way can put people on a totally different emotional trajectory.
You said that anger can point to things we care about and motivate us to make a difference. What if we have anger about things that we don't have power over, like the political situation in our country or people in power not being held accountable for things? What do we do with that anger?
Anger can promote collective action. That's well established. Doing things to make a difference. And I think one question to ask yourself is whether it is really the case that there's nothing we can do to address this issue. So if you have anger, towards a political or a cultural issue, there are often ways of trying to contribute to a cause locally or on a smaller scale that are still feasible and might help you channel that anger productively. The other thing you can do is you can regulate the anger. You can lean into your anger as a tool if it is aiding you in helping you follow through with the goals that you have. I want to fix this situation. I'm going to stay angry and hunger. So this is often like the canonical pre-game pep talk that a coach gives, like, you're going to let them come into our house? Did you hear what they said about you? Oh, blah, 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 blah. Clearly, I don't give
I wanted you to keep going.
I gave these talks these speeches for a reason, right? That's a way of harnessing emotion to achieve a particular objective. But in other cases, it might be, let's dial that back. Like maybe in a negotiation, you don't want to display the emotion, even though you're really angry with the person on the other side of the table. So now let's regulate. And lots of the tools that we've talked about so far can be helpful for regulating, as can lots of other ones that are out there. There are dozens of tools that exist for pushing these emotions around, for shifting them.
I'm not quite sure what the question is here, but something I think about a lot is that social media artificially keeps us in these very intense emotional states. So the algorithms are designed to make us feel strong emotions so that we keep scrolling. And those strong emotions are often anger, sadness, strong affirmation, like, yes, I agree with this person. How are you looking at that landscape and how we're all kind of being emotionally manipulated for hours and hours and hours every single day?
Well, we did a lot of research on social media back in the late 2000s into the mid 2010s. Boy, do I feel old right now in saying that. My God.
We were on the MySpace.
Yes, exactly. Oh boy, oh boy. What we found was that social media often pulls people to present glorified images of themselves, and it can lead to toxic social comparisons as a result because you're, bombarded with the highlight reel of someone else's life. So that's not great. On top of that, you do have these algorithms now pulling people in just to continue getting more eyeballs on things for as long as possible. We haven't looked at that component of social media in terms of how to help people regulate. What I often tell people, though, based on the early work we did here, was knowledge is power here. Like understanding how social media operates, how it can be really harmful, but also the opportunities that exist for it to enrich your life, I think is really important. The pendulum has swung so wildly from one end of the spectrum to the other when it comes to how we think about social media affecting our emotional lives. When I started, it was all just good. It was connecting us. Now it's just all bad, right? It's causing addiction and all these other problems. If I look at the science, my sense is that it's somewhere in between. I do think social media has the potential to do a lot of harm. And we want to educate our kids, our colleagues, our parents about what those harms are, educating people about the algorithmic component to this, educating them about how social comparisons work. At the same time, we want to point out, how can social media be harnessed for good? It can be an incredible tool for social support, for connecting people. I sometimes find that it is helpful before bed. I will watch these.
You're the first expert who's ever said that on this podcast.
I'm speaking personally about myself. I will watch these, ridiculously funny little clips, and it just kind of takes the temperature down on the day. And you know what else I'll sometimes do with those clips? I'll send one of them to my buddies, and then they'll send me one back, and we laugh. And it's a tool to regulate in a positive direction. Yes, social media has the potential to push our emotions around in lots of different ways. The question is, can you use it strategically to benefit you rather than take away from your daily experience?
You're incredibly famous for popularizing the idea that venting is a form of co-rumination, and rumination leads to depression and all these other negative outcomes. So when you're sitting around and just like complaining with your friend, you usually are pushing yourselves more to this negative outcome, this venting state. Do you think social media is a form of co-rumination?
I think it can be, and I think that's one of the toxic manifestations of it. And we see this happening a lot, where people get stuck in these echo chambers. It's these like virtual pylons on a topic, and it can then just mushroom and spread wildly. And on the one hand, that can motivate collective action and be a tool for fomenting change on this planet. On the other hand, it can be a very powerful weapon that leads to negative outcomes too. So the reason why venting, I don't endorse it, is if all you do is vent about a problem to someone else, that can strengthen the bonds between people, allowing people to express themselves, and someone else is there to listen and empathize with me. That's good. The problem is, if that is all you do, you leave those conversations feeling really good about your in-group, but the problem is still there. You haven't done anything to address it. So what the science suggests, the optimal way to talk about negative experiences is to follow 2 steps. Step 1, do find someone where you can express your emotions to them. It is important that if you have this desire to get it out, that you can, that someone's willing to listen to you, empathize with you, normalize your experience. But part 2 is, after you've had that opportunity to get it out, now the person you're talking to begins to work with you to help you reframe that experience, to help you actually work through the event. If you want to geek out with me about why those 2 steps are the ones I advocate, they basically scaffold onto 2 core needs that all human beings have when they are dealing with really intense negative experiences. This is research that comes from a Belgian psychologist, Bernard Ramay. We've got these social and emotional needs. We want to connect with someone else. We want to know we're not alone, right? And that other people are giving us these empathic social resources. But we also have cognitive needs. We've got something that has happened to us that is like sticking out in our minds. It's like a thorn in our side. And we need to ultimately remove the thorn and repair the damage. And so part 1 of the conversation, when you're just listening to me, oh, Ethan, that does sound really terrible. Oh, God. Like, that is addressing the social component, the social needs I have. When you're then talking to me and saying, well, what would you tell me if I was going through what you did? Or I actually went through something like that, and here's what I learned from it. I mean,
wait, the first one you did was one of your tools. You were helping them get perspective.
Exactly.
You were helping them use you.
And other people are in a prime position to activate those tools within us. So a true emotional advisor or chatter advisor, that's what they are adept at doing. First, they listen and empathize. Second, they work with the person to help them use the tools they already possess, but aren't capable of activating in that moment.
Which many of those might be the tools we're talking about today to use on ourselves.
Let's role play it. Like, Liz, you come to me and like, I listen attentively, authentically. Oh, that's really terrible. If we are close friends, I might even put my hand on your shoulder. We know that we're tactile species. Like an embrace sends so much information from one person to another.
It creates a feeling of safety.
Yeah, of safety, of attachment, of security. Only though, then this has been shown too, if it's wanted. And then you're telling me about a problem, I might say, like, this does seem right now huge. Think about how are you going to feel about this 2 years from now? Or, you told me that 3 years ago, you really struggled with something big. You got through that, and that seems way, way bigger than what you're dealing with right now. Do you agree? Or, Liz, what would you tell me if I was struggling with this? And in fact, I was struggling with this, and here's what you told me. So there are lots of ways that we can work with the person. Now, importantly, what I'm not doing is I'm not doing the following. You come, hey, Ethan, can I talk to you about this thing happened? I really want to talk to you about. Oh, for sure. I wrote a book on this. Chapter 4, page 76. You need to do A, B, and C, and tell me how it works tomorrow. Like, I don't jump into just giving
a solution.
Yeah, that backfires. We don't like people like that.
Well, it's interesting because I feel like in relationships, you always hear like, tell the person whether you want just to listen or you want advice.
Yes.
And you're actually saying not really either. You're going to listen, you're going to validate, but then you're going to ask these questions that help them use these tools versus give advice.
In some work that we did, we actually looked at, do people's preferences make a difference? And it turns out that they don't. So pushing people through both steps skillfully helped across the board. Now, in practice, so like how do you take this if you're listening and use it in your relationship? I do advocate, if it's not clear in a conversation when you should shift from listening to advising, you can ask for permission. I'll do this with my wife all the time. I'm like, I totally get it. I have a thought. Can I share? Sometimes she'll be like, yeah.
Nope.
Well, that's the other one. So let's start with a no. Sometimes she'll say, no, keep listening. And then when she does that, I do keep listening. But you know what else I do? I then try again a little bit later. And the bigger the emotion, typically the more time we need to spend just releasing before we are more receptive to the advice. So that has also been demonstrated. But I always try to follow this blueprint for a conversation, which is listen and then work with the person to...
But not give advice. Like, I think there's something so interesting about it. You're not saying, I think you should do this. You're saying, what will you think about this in 5 years? What would you tell yourself?
There's only one situation where I say, I really think you should do this. It's when someone asks me direct, what do you specifically think I should do? But typically it's working with the person to find their own solutions because so much of what we're talking about, it's subjective. It has to make sense to you. And you finding agentically the solution on your own, like with some guidance, that is often the key to moving on.
Does the research say what to do if somebody complains to us forever and never makes any changes in their own life?
I can't point to a specific study. I have a very strong belief about what to do. When we are experiencing chatter, we are intensely motivated to share it with other people. We want to talk about our chatter. That is a very common response or drive that we have. The problem is you find someone to talk to and then you start talking and then you just keep on talking over and over again because the chatter's continuing to churn in your head. I have sometimes had the experience when I've had chatter that I was having some trouble working through, and it happens to all of us. I know I'm being annoying with my wife about this chatter. Sometimes am I being annoying? And, she's lovely and withholds that negative response, but I know it to be true. Sometimes you can't help yourself. You just want to keep going. And so I do think that educating people about this is really important. A lot of people just don't have any insight, any self-awareness about what they are doing. It's almost like a self-preservation mode. It's like you're clawing to just get out of the cage that you feel stuck in. And you know that talking about it has the potential to help you, but unless you know how specifically to talk about it and who to talk with about it, you're not going to always be successful. You on the other side of this, you've got a choice, right? If at some point they're just incessant and they're bringing you down, you can make a choice to take some space away. There's an intuitive drive, I think, that we all have to do better in this department.
Well, I want to highlight something you said too, which I do think is important. It's the agency. You're giving them agency by the way that you're addressing this.
Yeah.
So my sister often talks about in therapy, she'll have ideas about what one of her clients should do well before that client might come to that conclusion. But if she's just like, I think you should do this, the client is much less likely to actually take those actions, to take those steps. So by doing this process of like, well, what would you do? What would you tell me in this situation? You're giving them the agency instead of you telling them what to do, which makes them much more likely to take action and less likely to just like dwell and dwell and dwell forever.
And it's essential. It's so important that people really fundamentally believe the new stories that they are constructing about their lives. If you don't believe it, it doesn't feel authentic and genuine. It's not going to have the same impact. And sometimes for the support provider, the friend, the chatter advisor, that requires patience. I've had friends who've struggled with some major things in their lives, health, relationship issues, and we've had many of the same conversations over and over and over again. It was baby steps, right, in the direction of progress, but it took time. And as a friend, I am happy to spend that time with that person, helping them.
Let's go back to negative self-talk. What are some of the most common types of negative self-talk that you've seen in your research?
So one very common form of negative self-talk is popularized as the inner critic, being overly self-critical. You're an idiot, such an idiot. And then it usually like slips into expletive-filled phrases like such a goddamn idiot, blah, 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 and just looping that over and over. You're no good, et cetera, et cetera. But negative self-talk cuts across lots of different kinds of emotional experiences. Negative self-talk can also be just harping on the things that someone maybe said to you that aggravate you. I remember at one point earlier in my career, I had submitted a research article in the way that academics work. You work really hard on this paper, you try to get it perfect, and then you send it out for blind peer review. And so now you have 3 to 5 world experts in your topic, and they offer critiques of your paper. And the reviews came back. 2 were very positive, and 1 was just, they were nasty. I mean, they were saying things that they didn't need to say ad hominem and just like, this is garbage. So what did I do? It wasn't inner critique, you're an idiot, such an idiot. I then spent the next afternoon walking around my neighborhood saying, why don't you tell me it's garbage to my face? In my head, I'm just going over what they said and then how I would like to respond, right? And so that's another form of negative self-talk.
I'll also do that sometimes after I was in a situation, like what I wish I had said instead. And
rehearsing over and over. And by the way, that like if we think about the functionality of our inner voice, your inner voice is your ability to silently use language to reflect on your life. And that's an amazing tool that we all possess. When we're experiencing chatter, negative self-talk, that's an example of using this tool in a harmful way, right? We're just harping over the same thing over and over. But what good comes from your inner voice? Well, it's simulating and planning. Like, hey, this is an important thing coming up. Let me go over how I'm going to talk to this person during this interview, right? Or how might have I responded differently so that I don't do the same thing again in the future? Or motivating ourselves in our exercising. You ever talk to yourself in the gym?
Yeah, I do. I it's not quite a talk, but I do picture like my anxiety dissipating off of my body, and I'll tell myself you're going to sleep so well tonight and stuff like that.
And you just used distant self-talk, actually. You just said you're going to sleep.
I do that, yeah.
Right. So studies show actually that people spontaneously use distant self-talk when they're doing things that require motivation and self-control.
What does the science say about affirmations? Are they effective? Is there a way to make them more effective?
The science on affirmations is complex. You can see some benefits associated with affirming important skills, attributes, values that, kind of characterize you. And if that serves as an impetus to action, if it's motivating, like that's great. If all you do is in the Saturday night live sense, like stand in the mirror, like you're going to be just fine. Like if you just do that on your own, that's a much weaker kind of intervention than if you take specific concrete steps, if there's like a cascading process that follows that. I would say there's nothing harmful about engaging in an affirmation, but it's not enough. There are other tools that have a lot of heft behind them that I advise people to go to. And if you're looking for a quick jolt of positivity, go to your senses. Your senses are so powerful. Senses are how we make sense of the world, how we take in information about the world, and they operate through our emotions. You ask people, why do you listen to music? Almost 100% will say, I listen to music because I like the way it makes me feel. I can manipulate an entire audience's emotional state within a matter of seconds. I do it all the time by playing 5 seconds of, Journey's Don't Stop Believin'. Everyone is feeling great.
Well, you see it in political rallies.
You see it in political rallies. Turn back the clock several centuries, you had bands accompanying militaries during engagements. Why do you think that is?
Oh, that's so interesting.
Right? It's to manipulate emotions. Think about what are the sensory experiences that can very, very quickly push us in different emotional directions. Many people don't avail themselves of these tools, in particular music, although they understand that they listen to music because they like the way it makes them feel. In the studies that we've done, only between 10 and 30% of people report using music as a tool to make themselves feel better.
Oh, that's interesting. So like we are like, oh yeah, that's nice when it happens, but we don't do
We're
it
not
proactively.
Strategic. We are not proactive about leveraging that tool. All of our senses can shift our emotions, by the way. Like you no doubt have shellacked yourself with some substance today to influence the way you feel about yourself.
My makeup?
No, I wasn't going to say makeup.
Shellac. Okay.
Shellac. I was thinking more of like deodorant.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Fair
I
to
do
say?
have deodorant on.
You have deodorant on? Maybe you spritz something that smells nice.
Oh, like a scent.
A scent.
Interesting.
Maybe shellac is the wrong word. Spritz is better. Hotels, they pipe scents through the ventilation to influence the way we make.
Also, like Subway, that bread smell that and Disneyland. I read about this. I'm such a Disney adult, but they change the scents throughout the park to manipulate how you feel as you go through different parts of the park.
There you go. I mean, companies are spending tons of money on this. I remember when my daughters were younger, we went to a hotel in Chicago, walk in, where like you're just hit with this amazing aroma that's pumped through the ventilation. And one of my daughters like, Daddy, I love it in here. Can we stay here forever? Precisely what the hotel is trying to do, right? So taste, I mean, do you go out to dinner?
Yeah.
Yeah. And do you spend a significant amount of money on food?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Is it just for sustenance? Or do you like the way it makes you feel? You want to shift your emotions really quick? Tackle your senses and be strategic in how you do it. Now, listening to Journey is not going to solve our biggest problems, nor is having a fantastic slice of pizza. It has the potential to give us a temporary shift in a direction that we want to go into, which is often useful for then allowing you to engage with other tools. You want to have lots of tools at your disposal so you can flexibly bring them in to help you deal with the situations you're struggling with. It's not always clear which tools you're going to need, right? I'll always start with distant self-talk, mental time travel into the future and the past. Sometimes I need to go for a walk in nature to expand my perspective. Right before I arrived at your studio, I got an email that was aggravating. And I was thinking about it and I was going in different directions. What if this and what if that? And then we hit the Golden Gate Bridge and behind it, I saw the mountains and it was instant. And that research shows consistently that exposure to green spaces has a potential to do that to us. So sometimes I'll add in some green space exposure. Sometimes I'll avoid for a little bit, right? I'll distract from a problem to let my emotions subside and I'll come back to it. So you want to be really flexible, but the senses, music and others can be a helpful just jolt into that direction.
I want to linger on this two-partness of it all because we talk about often on this podcast how when you're in a stressed out state, the parts of your brain that are responsible for creative thinking and problem solving literally go offline. So if you're stressed out, you can't come up with the solutions that are going to get you out of the stress. So is your point, use these tools, shift you out of that state, and then those parts of your brain come back online?
Yeah, so this is a question of effort. And so when you're experiencing a big negative emotion or chatter's taking over, I often describe it as akin to it acts like a sponge in your brain and it soaks up all of the precious resources you have to think objectively and reasonably. So if there's a very low effort way to get out of that state, that can be really, really useful. And that's what some of these sensory shifters have the potential to do. It's just like a quick hit in the opposite direction to then free you up to take another step.
And are there sensory shifters that match to certain situations, or is it all just subjective and based on what the person needs?
Liz, this is the $64,000 question. Is that feels cheaper nowadays than when it first probably came out, but this is the $64 trillion question. As a scientist who does research in this space and keeps up with the literature, I can tell you about lots of different tools, science-based tools, dozens of them. I can tell you what they are. I can tell you about how they work. I can tell you about why they work. What I can't do is prescribe combinations of those tools to individuals dealing with certain situations. The science has not yet gotten to a point where someone can walk in the door, I learn about this person and their background, I learn about the situation they're in, and then I say, okay, let's use these 4 tools in this situation. And then when you're in this other context, I want you to use these 6 ones. We are on the precipice of being able to answer those questions. I think AI is going to help quite a bit because essentially what we need to do is be able to look at patterns over time. When I'm in this situation and I use these tools, the outcomes are good. When I'm in this other situation, I use these other tools, the outcomes are bad. Once we learn those patterns, then we can start prescribing these tools. And I think we'll soon be there.
And so just to wrap up the affirmations thing, maybe they work a little bit, but like you're like, these other sensory tools work much better. So why not just avail yourself to them?
Yeah, sensory tools are just powerful levers that can push you in other directions. The reason I'm being somewhat evasive on the affirmation work, that literature is messier in the sense of there's some contexts where they work, other contexts where they don't, and we don't have great, clear signal about how to predict their benefits.
I guess the thing that I'm wondering about is we have so much negative self-talk in our head. Is there any value to trying to like tip the scales and just throw some positive thoughts in there because we have so much inherent negative self-talk?
Well, I think when you're being like really self-critical, one thing you can do is accept, like recognizing that you are a human being like all other human beings. And sometimes we mess up, like accepting the fact that is part of our common experience. That can be a powerful antidote to that self-critique, self-acceptance as an antidote. That's a little bit different. It's a different kind of jujitsu move, if you will.
So it's not like I'm so great. It's like I'm a human and humans are fallible.
It's tapping into this shared understanding that we all possess, right? That we're just part of a species. Like first, just knowing that we're part of a group, that in and of itself can be really alleviating of negative emotion. We're not distinct. We're like anyone else. Anyone else could have screwed up in this way. My God, does that feel good to have that insight? Like, I don't know about you, but when I think about the screw ups that literally have kept me up at night and created that 3 a.m. chatter, part of what's going through my head is not just, you really screwed this up. It's, I feel alone in the screw up. Like no one has ever screwed up in this way before. And no one will be able to understand. And so what we're talking about now is counteracting that, not by saying, I'm powerful, I can do it. It's lots of people, everyone screws up in ways like this, et cetera, et cetera. And that just turns the volume down.
How do we know when we should use a tool to shift our emotional state or amplify our emotional state? So like music specifically.
Yeah.
Sometimes if I'm sad, I'm like, should I like listen to the saddest song in the world and just sit here crying for a little
Yes.
bit? Or should I watch like a movie that's going to make me cry? Or should I try to go the opposite way and put on like, I want to dance with somebody?
It's funny that now I'm hearing like Whitney Houston in my head.
I'm trying to subliminally make you happy.
Yes. I see my face. I love that song. She's great. It entirely depends on what your goal is. So let's run with the sad music example because it's a really common one. A lot of people, when they're feeling glum, they don't put on Journey or, plug in your favorite feel-good music. They instead listen to Adele or The Darker Side of Taylor, whatever those soundtracks are. You know the songs. Ophelia, maybe?
No.
No? That's a good one?
No.
Okay, I'm going to stop. I'm not going to even try. I'm going to get so much shade from my kids if you put this
Nothing new always gets me in my feelings.
Nothing new.
You
Okay.
probably have not heard it.
I don't know that one.
It's okay.
I know the New York song. I like that one a lot.
Just move on, Ethan.
Okay, I'll just keep going. Let's talk about sadness for a second. Sadness also serves an adaptive benefit. How can that be? How can feeling sad be good? Well, so when we experience sadness when we encounter some loss that we can't replace. Someone passes away. They're never coming back. They can't, right? They're not. We get fired from a job. We're rejected. That relationship is over. Cannot fix it. So in those circumstances, we often experience this emotional response called sadness. What are its features? Well, when you experience sadness, it motivates you to turn your attention inward. So you become more introspective because we're now trying to make new meaning out of this new hand that we've just been dealt, right? Like your life has just changed. You still need to navigate the world in these changed circumstances. So how are you going to do it? So sadness motivates us to go inside and try to kind of make new meaning out of our experiences. And turns out that can be very useful as opposed to just chronically avoiding thinking about the problem and never coming to terms with it, right? If you've just been rejected or you had a bad show, something didn't go your way, or you got a bad review on the book and your inclination is to listen to fill in, the blanks with your favorite negative song. And that's working for you. It's helping you actually process and work through the event. Great. The problem is some people start doing that and then they just stay. They don't listen to like the song. They listen to the whole soundtrack. And then they just start feeling worse and worse and they don't come out of it. So what I tell people is, look, if listening to sad music is working for you, it's helping you achieve your goals of how you want to feel and behave, keep doing it, right? Sometimes people want to sit with the sadness for a little bit. But if you're feeling sad and you want to feel better, don't keep listening to the sad music. Go the opposite direction.
How do we know when our emotions are giving us valuable information versus something that we should try to shift away from? How do I know when my anxiety is telling me I should leave this relationship or move to a different city or something like that versus my anxiety is just my anxiety and I should shift away from it?
You can think about your emotions as it's like a little alarm going off that's telling you to pay attention. And then once you focus on the issue, you can then not just believing automatically, oh, I'm anxious right now. This is the truth. Let me go deeper. Performing a kind of sober analysis, right? Like, is this something that history tells me I should be anxious about? Like, if we go with anxiety in particular, most of us have our triggers, right? There are certain domains that we become overly sensitive to. We know that 9 times out of 10, or 99 times out of 100, however you want to frame it, nothing bad is going to happen. Reminding ourselves of that can be really helpful. You might be thinking right now, well, oh, yeah, fine, easier said than done. How do you actually do that? Like when I feel anxiety, it's all consuming and I think it feels really real. This is where this technique called implementation intentions with mental contrasting, otherwise known as WOOP. I like WOOP a lot. There's a phrasing. This is where this comes in handy. So WOOP is a framework to help you take knowledge that you have acquired about how to manage your emotional life and put it into practice effortlessly as you are living your life to help you follow through with your goals. So let's say your goal is, I want to be able to know when I should listen to my emotions and when I should go the other way. So we would create a WOOP. Let's start with a W. That's the wish. We've just articulated. Your wish is your goal. My goal is know when to listen to my emotions and when not to. The first O in WOOP, this is the outcome. All right, Liz, if you're successful at learning when to listen, what's the outcome? What's going to happen? Tell me.
I will make much better decisions and probably feel better on a day-to-day basis.
Is that something that would be good for you?
Yeah, I would love that.
Okay, so the reason we go through the first O right now is to really kind of motivate you to pursue this goal, because sometimes our goals are hard to pursue. Then we get to the second O. These are the obstacles, in particular, personal obstacles. So, Liz, tell me right now, what are the obstacles that might get in the way of you achieving this goal you have and the wonderful outcomes that would follow?
Probably just the magnitude of my anxiety. I feel anxiety a lot of the time, and often it makes me play it safer than I normally would want to.
Okay, so beautiful. Now we get to the P, our plan. Our plan for addressing the obstacle that you've just delineated that gets in the way of you succeeding in addressing your goal. And so it's not any plan, though. It's what we call an if-then plan. And so the idea is we're linking a certain situation with a very specific tool. So if I find myself experiencing anxiety really intensely and I'm not really sure what to do with it, then, and now we're going to plug in a tool that helps you minimize that anxiety in that moment so that you can then discern whether this is appropriate or not, right? And so which tool should you plug in? Well, if it were me, and we're talking about like the real anxiety triggers, it's going to be distant self-talk, it's going to be mental time travel, it's going to be my emotional advisory board as well. I'm going to run this by a few people if it's a really significant one. And then I'm going to be in a position where I can make a sound choice about what to do. I've been in situations before where I've done things like this. And, the feedback I get is, look, this is something you need to be careful about. And so let's think about how to do that. I don't love that. I prefer it. This situation is, this is not something to worry about at all. But sometimes we do have those situations. It's just that in your mind and the mind of anyone who's experiencing intense anxiety, everything feels like we need to address it right now. So doing these whoops, we just did one in maybe 2 minutes. This is more effortful in terms of the tools that are out there. But what I like to tell people is, think about the amount of time you sometimes spend in an unproductive emotional state. Like, how much time do you spend compared to what we just did?
Yeah.
Now you've got a recipe for how to approach this really important area of your life. And the research shows that this really makes a difference. This is also, by the way, what the Navy SEALs do before every engagement that they have. They sit around, they don't call it WOOP, but they sit around in a room, and Socratic style, the first thing they do is, all right, what's our objective? The wish. What does success look like? That's the outcome. All right, how does this go sideways? And they list out every way it goes sideways. And then for every way it could potentially go sideways, they come up with 2 or 3 different
if-then plans.
And then they go around and they make sure that everyone is on the same page. Navy SEAL is one of the most successful organizations on the planet in terms of what they do. This is a technology that they have. I'm not sure how they stumbled on it, but they use it, and it scaffolds beautifully onto the science about how to make people more successful at achieving their goals.
Oh, I love the idea that I'm Navy SEAling my mind. That
There you go.
is so motivating to me. Just to ground this in practical, usable reality for people, you give the advice to pick the 2 senses that pack the greatest punch at the lowest cost. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so we've got to start self-experimenting. So the invitation I give to everyone is, step 1, learn about what these tools are. Step 2, start self-experimenting. It's like when I start at a new exercise regimen, I'm trying out different things. I'm figuring out which are the exercises that work best given the unique goals that I have. And I quickly find what those exercises are. Noteworthy, sometimes it changes. I'm using some exercise for 2 weeks and then I've got to pivot to some others. That's the kind of flexibility and familiarity with tools that we want to have people develop. So if we, as an example, start with the senses, Start with music, like create a couple of playlists. Feel good, feel calm, feel sad. Have them at the ready so that when you experience a moment where you want to feel better, you can just put it on. By the way, those playlists can serve double duty. You can also use them to influence other people's emotions. So it's not uncommon for instructors to have certain kinds of music on when people come into a lecture hall. It's not uncommon for me as sometimes an obnoxious, corny dad to play certain music with my kids and their friends in the back seat.
Yeah, I love like your friend getting into your car and you're already setting the tone, or a party. We use party playlists all the time instead of just being, I'll do like French 1950s playlist to sound cool. But like, I'm like, should I think more about the emotion I want to cultivate?
You are the maestro. You are the orchestra conductor. And so choose another sense too. Maybe it's food. Food is a powerful one. Food is such a powerful one. What are the foods that gives you a little jolt of positivity without taking you into the territory of emotional eating, which might take you too far? All of these tools, by the way, this is an important disclaimer. All of these tools have to be used in proportion. They can be used to an extreme. A bite of something wonderfully tasty can provide us with enormous positivity, but too much of it, we can get nauseous or have our cholesterol levels rise.
Well, that's why I like this advice of pack the greatest punch at the lowest cost, because for you, maybe you can't control yourself with certain things or certain things tip you in a certain way.
That's right.
And so that would be a great cost. And maybe that wouldn't be the sense that you would choose.
That's a great synthesis. So music for me is my go-to. It's simple, it's easy, it's reliable. Pizza would be a more challenging proposition. If you put New York style in particular pizza in front of me, I might have a hard time stopping. And then the positivity would transform into other kinds of emotions.
The people who tend more towards happiness, or the countries that tend more towards happiness, do you think they're intuitively using these tools more? Do you think there's something else going on there?
I think there is something else going on there. I think there are cultural forces that we haven't really talked about that are really powerful in terms of shaping our emotional lives. And I think we need to spend a lot more attention thinking about those cultural forces in our current society. Culture is invisible air we breathe. It is ever present. And it shapes the way we think about things. It gives us norms. Here's how things tend to be. It also gives us tools to help us live successfully in that culture. So if you're in a culture that doesn't value, for example, emotional displays, one of the tools that culture might give you is the tool of suppression, suppressing those responses. Certain East Asian cultures, right, emotional displays are less valued, less sanctioned. Suppression, much higher in those cultures. You create different cultures in your household, your family. There's a culture there. With my kids, like, I'm giving them beliefs about their emotional lives from the time they're little kids, right? I'm teaching them how to think about their emotions. I'm also giving them tools, regardless of whether I'm explicitly talking to them about these things or I'm just at the dinner table saying, oh my goodness, I was nervous today. And you know what I did? I thought about it this way, and boy, did that turn the volume down. Kids are soaking things up. You don't always have to be direct with them. So to go back to the question about why different cultures have different emotional experiences and levels of happiness, I don't think it's just these people out of nowhere are becoming better regulators and more resilient. Their culture is supporting those emotional experiences in powerful ways.
So if we're looking for the action step here, we could move, or we could create a microculture around ourselves that cultivates the emotions that we want.
That's right. So if you are in a toxic culture, let's start there. You really have two choices. You can leave it, and if the culture is really oppressive, that's not a defeatist approach.
And this could be on a country level. This could be just at your workplace.
Absolutely. It could be in your home.
Yeah.
I mean, or you can try to change the culture. And changing the culture can be a powerful way of enhancing your emotional experience, right? So little things, how you start a meeting, right? How do you respond to presentations from other people? So like I run lab meetings, and when we structure the lab, we always start with a disclaimer that you're going to give your presentation on your research, and And our job is with complete compassion to try to find the holes in your presentation so that once you leave and you go out there in a less friendly atmosphere, you're going to be bulletproof. And so what that does at the outset is that establishes a safe space, a culture of support, which then allows us to, in an unfiltered way, provide, really sometimes biting feedback. The intention is not to mow down. The intention of that feedback is to lift up. If I didn't provide that preamble at the beginning, no one would be in my lab, right? Because it would be so unbelievably toxic. And so sometimes there are little things you can do to change that culture. A lot of people, though, we talk about culture, but it's just so abstract. Like, what is it? And thinking about it in terms of, values, beliefs, practices, I think makes it a lot easier to wrap our heads around how we can actually go about maybe trying to change it. Like, what do we value in this house, in this home? What do we value here? Why are we doing this?
Mm-hmm.
That's a way you could change your culture.
Well, and I just think it's so important because I think a lot of us might be, trying to put on the happy music to hype ourselves up every day, but we're hanging out with a friend group that's complaining and talking shit all the time. So we're living in this culture that's counter to how we want to feel.
These are all different forces that interact. And so oftentimes people talk about one or the other. So we've got to change the structure, right, of the organization or the culture of the organization. That's where you've got to put all the resources. And you have other people say, no, it's about the individual. Just make them resilient, give them tools. Which one do you think it is, Professor Kross? Is it the structure or is it the person? I don't have to choose because it's both. And if you want maximal change, maximal goodness, if you will, you want to be giving people resources they can use on their own. You also want to be working to influence those structures and cultures to make them healthier and more productive.
Anybody listening, we're talking micro and macro, like
Yes.
countrywide, home-wide,
right.
organization-wide. Like those are all cultures you're being influenced by right now.
Totally.
I've read research that suppressed emotions can lead to autoimmune diseases, which is one of the reasons why women typically have higher rates of autoimmune disease. Does that track with what you have read or studied?
At a broad level, yes, with the caveat about the gendered part of it. I'm just not familiar with that part of it. Here's how that jives with the work that I'm familiar with. If you are suppressing an emotional response continually, that is keeping your body active in this response, it's taking resources away from other systems in your body and activating any kind of response indefinitely or for prolonged periods of time is going to exert a similar strain on your physical apparatus. Do we have links between those states and inflammation, autoimmunity problems, cancer, etc.? Yeah, those links exist. So if women are suppressing more, that's a connect the dots bit. I would like to just see the direct evidence there. I think it's totally possible. I'm just not familiar with it.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because there are quite a bit higher rates of autoimmune conditions in women. And so I think researchers are trying to figure out why that is. What's the case for that? And I think women are, speaking of culture, taught culturally to suppress emotions a lot more. Well, actually, no, now I'm taking that back. Men are taught to suppress emotions a lot too.
See, this is why I pled the fifth and that I don't know of that evidence.
Yeah.
Here's how I think about that if we zoom out.
Yeah.
It's activating any of these tools too intensely or for too long can be worrisome from a health point of view. How stress gets under the skin to impact us in all these different pernicious ways, like chatter is one of those key mechanisms. And so you could plug suppression in, chronic suppression for chatter. It would make sense that could lead to similar outcomes.
I just want to do a quick little recap of the tools that we've talked about. We've talked about distancing language, so that's using you, even if you're talking to yourself. We've talked about going back in time and going forward in time. We've also talked about some sensory tools. We've talked about listening to music. We've talked about eating yummy food. We've talked about nature, which I think would be kind of like smelling and seeing and
perspective broadening too. The quick bit on nature is what it does is, number one, it draws your attention away from your problems and onto surroundings. It kind of captures your attention. We develop a soft fascination with nature. It's like, I'm not magnifying glass looking at the structure of the leaves. It's just, I'm taking it in.
And is that different than like looking at a cityscape? if I'm looking out at 7th Avenue, is it going to be activating my brain in a different way than if I'm looking out at Central Park?
Probably.
Okay.
Because if you were to say looking at Manhattan Island from a plane from afar, that's a different story. But when you're walking down Fifth Avenue, you've got the horns blaring and, you got buildings all around you that are occluding your vision. And so,
wait, that's so interesting because we're talking about how to manipulate our senses to have emotions we want to have. But you just said a bunch of ways that our senses are being essentially assaulted at times.
absolutely.
And we should be aware of that probably as well. Like
Sure.
in what ways are our senses like being bombarded with things that are making us feel not the way we want to feel?
Absolutely. Bringing your white noise machine when you go visit New York City. Lovely city.
Or like when you get in an Uber and there's the smelly thing.
Oh, yeah,
I
that's
hate
common.
it.
Yes, very common.
Yeah.
But yeah, back to nature. So it can give you this opportunity to just rest and restore. It gives you a break. It's like a recharging mechanism. The other way that nature can help you is it gives you this opportunity to broaden your perspective. So when you see a beautiful sunset or a mountain range, you feel a bit smaller. When you are, it elicits this emotion of awe, like, my God, this is just so beautiful. How does this exist? And when you're contemplating that, it leads you to feel a little bit smaller about yourself, and your problems feel smaller too, which can be helpful for managing emotions.
Are there any other tools outside of the ones that we've talked about that you just find like really, really helpful for either managing chatter or shifting emotions? Because I think those are very interrelated.
Yeah, I'll just bullet off a few. So being strategic in how you deploy your attention, and we talked a little bit about this, is really very important. Recognizing that sometimes strategic avoidance can be useful. That is, I get the email that aggravates me, I don't respond right away. I divert my attention, I distract productively by doing something else, and I come back to the email an hour later or a day later. It's always better in that situation. Many situations are similar in that regard, where taking some time away and coming back to it can be useful. We don't want to chronically avoid, but being strategic with our attention, that can be very useful. Expressive writing, powerful tool. When you're struggling with a problem, sitting down and writing about it for about 15 minutes, continuously just letting yourself go, doing it for a day or even 3 days in a row, lots of research showing that can be very helpful. In the study I mentioned earlier in the conversation about COVID and what people were doing to help them manage their anxiety, we asked people about 18 different strategies. The most effective strategy was expressive writing. It was also the least utilized strategy, the very, very bottom.
Why do we not want to do it? I don't want to do it.
Well, you tell me, and let's see if you can get it.
I don't know. I literally I've done episodes about journaling.
I don't want to do it either.
So
I think there are two reasons. Number one, it is effortful. You've got to sit down and you've got to write for 15 minutes. And if that's something that's getting in the way, what I would remind you to think about is just how much time do you spend ruminating, worrying, chatter? Is it 15 minutes? My guess is much more. So that helps with that. But there's a vulnerability that comes with writing expressively about something, because you are taking the muck that exists in your mind that you probably are at some level don't want other people to have access to, fair to say. Like sometimes when we're experiencing chatter, it's outlandish. It's all over the place. And now you're taking those hidden private thoughts and you're creating evidence. You're actually putting them down on paper. So I'll often ask audiences to do this. I actually tell them, I know you don't want to. I'm telling you to do it. And I actually nudge them to do it. They're always grateful for it. But I joke, there are paper shredders or lighter fluid right outside.
You could type it. Actually, I've read that writing is better, but I was going to say you could type it and delete it.
Type it too. Liz, there was one moment, it was a couple of years ago, and there was just something very stressful professionally that I was dealing with. I tried to distance self-talk and mental time travel. It helped a little bit, not where I wanted it to be. And I remember I'm on a plane. I took out my little journal. I lifted the lid so no one could see. And I looked both, and then I just started going. And I went, and my God, did it really help me feel better? Because what it does is it helps you create a narrative, the beginning, middle, and end. After I was done, you know what I did? I CIA level encryption crossed out the text. And when I was finished doing that, you know what I did? I did it again. So expressive writing, here's a fun one, and it's a really good one. Do something good for other people. One of the best ways to make yourself feel better is to do something good for someone else. Research consistently shows this to be true.
I do have a question. I think a lot of us intuitively know that doing something good for somebody else will make us feel better. Giving to philanthropy will make us feel better, but we don't do it.
Totally.
Why do we do it?
It's because we do have these egocentric biases to focus on ourselves. My guess is, doing good for your husband, you're not going to really have any hesitation to help out there. But there are other contexts where, professional contexts, for example, where, maybe you're in the same lane as someone else and you can do good for them, but that could have implications for your standing or your value, right? So I think it gets a little bit more complex there. And those instances, consistently you do help, it helps you anyway, but
yeah, it's interesting. I actually have a theory about this is one of the reasons why, even though there's so much research that shows that when you are raising kids, your happiness levels decrease, but people find it meaningful. They really like it, and they obviously keep doing it for many, many reasons. And I think one of those reasons is that it forces you to do something for other people, but you're doing it in sort of a self-interested way because it's your progeny, it's your family. Same with like taking care of a pet. It's work, but you're getting the benefits of helping another creature.
Well, in fact, you're describing the mechanisms that explain this.
Yeah.
And scientists have looked at that, and one account is helping other people is a really great way of helping yourself, right? Because there's reciprocity. I help you, you come back to help.
Oh, even outside of feeling good.
Even outside of feeling good, there are some other benefits. And you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm okay if doing good out there, even if it is driven at a very deep level by some self-interest, that's fine to me because you're still doing good for society. Let me see if I forget any other biggies. Oh, yes, one more. Our places and our environments. A couple of ways this can help. So thinking about what your emotional oases are, for example. So we attach to places the same way we attach to people. Some people, their mere presence provides us with a sense of safety and security. That is true of places as well. When my kids were little and they would get in trouble, they would always say, I want to go home. I want to go to my room. Their room was a sense of safety and security. Being there helps. For me, it's the local tea house, a couple of coffee shops. Being there makes me feel safe and secure. I've spent a lot of time there. Good things have happened. So thinking about what those spaces are that give you a sense of restoration, I think that's really powerful. And then not underestimating the more micro spaces that we are occupying ourselves. So like I look around at this studio right now. Good job. I'm seeing a plant, like that's really good. Research shows that just plants, that can help us. I'm seeing some nice kind of like orderliness here, which is giving me a sense of calm. Organizing our spaces, pictures of loved ones in our spaces.
So I don't know if it counts, but this is a drawing of my cat who has passed, but she's reading my book and my friends got it for me as a present. And I really love just like having her energy in here with me.
We've done studies. We have people think about really painful experiences. Sometimes we show them a picture of a loved one right before they think about it. In other cases, we show them a picture right after. Turns out that showing the picture before doesn't help. So looking at like the picture of the loved one before you're going on stage doesn't matter. But looking at the picture after speeds up the rate at which we recover emotionally. Because what it does is it activates this internal, we call it a representation, but it's this understanding of that there's a person out there that loves us, that we're connected to, and that provides us with a sense of safety and security. These are little opportunities to shape our surroundings, to influence how we feel from the outside in. My feeling is we should take every opportunity we can to help us manage these emotional states because, according to some research, we're experiencing emotions 90% of the time that we're awake, and probably when we're sleeping too quite a bit. So
honestly, that feels low to me. I'm like, when am I not experiencing emotion?
Yeah, 90% is pretty good. There's some error, so maybe it's a little
I just feel
higher.
like I'm constantly experiencing
Yes.
emotions. But that is the best argument that I've heard for putting a photo of loved ones on your
Yeah.
desk, which I feel like used to be more in vogue, and it's like less people do it now. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, print out a photo and put it on
Print
your
out a
desk.
photo. Like, think twice about your screensaver on your iPhone.
Ooh, interesting. We've talked about a number of ways in which negative emotions and negative self-talk are actually helping us. We've talked about anger, we've talked about anxiety, and we've talked about sadness. Are there any other emotions that you think get a bad rap that you kind of want to make a case for the benefits of?
Envy.
Mm.
Envy can be motivating. There is a dark, malicious envy, but you see someone at your level who is outperforming you in some way, and that can actually motivate you. Well, you know what? They can do it. I can do it too.
Are there tools that you found kind of consistently work for envy when it gets, I feel like we live in a strong envy age. With social media, you're exposed
Yeah.
to so many lives
Yeah.
that you're never really going to get
Yeah.
to live.
I think being able to recognize like what is attainable and what is not. For the social media, the most powerful way of getting in there is to recognize that this is not reality. This is a highlight reel. Because so many people are on social media, people understand that to be true,
Mhm.
right? So if your automatic response is to feel a pinch of envy when you see the person in, wherever, Cabo, Costa Rica, blah, 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 remind yourself that they may have taken like 500 pictures to
Yeah.
get to that point. And so that can be powerful. Like knowledge is power in that regard. But then in terms of how to harness envy, it's like, oh yeah, they were able, this is about social comparisons.
Mhm.
We talk about social comparisons negatively.
Mhm.
Social comparisons are part of how we work as human beings. And I think that's also really important to understand. If you're comparing yourself to others, that's how we learn about ourselves and our place in this world. So when we're not sure of how we stack up on some dimension that is important, what we do is we turn to others to see, okay, how are other people doing on this thing? If one of my daughters doesn't do well on her exam, the first thing she does is she finds out how everyone else did. So she wants to understand, is it normative? Maybe her grade is actually really, really good. So we are constantly making comparisons with other people to learn about who we are. It's about understanding how to navigate that comparison process fruitfully without, just feeling bad about ourselves because you're always
What if
looking
we're
up to
always coming
someone.
up short? Like,
Yeah,
what if
well,
we're always like, I'm a piece of shit?
Well, go down, right? Like you could compare yourself to people who are not doing as good as you. That's a very important counterweight in a certain sense. Like
Is that not like an asshole thing to do?
I don't think it is.
Okay.
It's not a way of making fun of someone else. I think it's an asshole thing to shit on yourself incessantly because you haven't, done X, Y, and Z. Well, you've done a heck of a lot more than all those other people. And that's in your head, right? It's not.
You're not telling them.
You're not telling them. It's about recalibrating when you're going too far in one direction as opposed to the
like
other.
just understanding there's a calibration metric at play, and we're probably over indexing on one side of that
And
calibration
you
metric.
could over index on the other. And like being more like narcissistic and self-aggrandizing, like, oh my God, yeah. The proverbial, you started cursing, so now I'm gonna the proverbial, like, my shit don't stink. Oh, really? So
shit's a little stinkier than this guy.
that's right.
Yeah.
So how do you calibrate that?
Okay. This can be in the emotion realm. This can be in any realm of your life. But what is one habit that's changed your life?
This is going to be really boring, but it's for me, it's powerful. Walking to work and taking the kind of tree-lined or nature-lined, in Michigan, it's not always tree-lined, path to work. It has given me way more mobility. So like the amount of steps I get is tremendous, but also cognitively, it is a source of enormous replenishment because on those walks, I have opportunities to think about ideas, to connect with people sometimes. And so simply choosing not to drive to work each day was huge.
What's one thing about negative self-talk that you wish everyone knew?
That negative self-talk in small doses is fine. It's that when it metastasizes into chatter, that it becomes harmful. And that when that happens, you are eminently capable of nipping it in the bud if you know what tools you should recruit to do so.
And then I would love just one thing that people can take away from this episode that they can do as soon as they turn this episode off that will immediately make them feel some benefit or be like, oh yeah, he knows his stuff, like this stuff works.
Listen to Journey's Don't Stop Believin' and see what effect it has on your emotions in any direction.
I love that. I first heard that song in Laguna Beach. There was an episode and like Steven, who's the hot guy. And do you know the show, Laguna Beach?
Unfortunately, I do.
Steven was the hot guy and he played it for his girlfriend at the time. I have all the associations beyond the song just being fun of like, oh, the cool hot guy played it and he was like in the know because he knew this song. And that was my first exposure to it.
Well, that's really, I mean, if I can geek out for a second, that's the Proust effect where your senses are linked with memories, not just emotions, which is why certain songs or tastes or smells will actually transport you back to certain times in your life. And so if they're particular positive emotional experiences you have, you could get like a multiple bang for your buck experience by choosing the right song. For me, this is going to be weird. That Spice Girls song, whatever the
Wanna Be? If you want to be my lover.
Yeah,
okay.
That was, I remember, like really popular when I was in high school, like my second semester, I'm pretty sure. And it was like a carefree time when grades were done. And every time I think about it, I'm like driving a Toyota Corolla and I'm going to see my buddy. And I don't listen to it as much as I should, but.
Well, and it also speaks to the individuality of things. Like my mom got in an accident when I was a kid and Don't Worry, Be Happy was like the big hit song at the time. And so my dad associates that song with like, don't worry, be happy. Now it's driving to and from the hospital to visit his like wife who was on a ventilator. And he hates it, even though it's a happy song. Totally. And so I do think that it speaks to maybe Don't Stop Believing is like, brings up a lot of negative shit for you. But if it doesn't, you know, we got to find our own tools.
We got to find our own tools. And it's just a great example though of, you know, when I play that for an audience, 95% start literally jamming in their seats. 5% cringe. Doesn't matter. It's an emotional experience.
I love that. Okay. Ethan Kross, can you tell us a little bit in your own words about Shift and any other work that you want to spotlight?
Shift is a book about your emotional life, and it's about teaching you about what emotions are. We start experiencing emotions when we're in the womb, but we never really get a user's manual. It's meant to be a science-based user's guide to help you manage your emotional life. We recently launched an institute at the University of Michigan called the Institute for Mental Fitness, where we are trying to both innovate further in this space by addressing some of the really big open challenges that exist, some of which we've talked about. How do you prescribe these strategies? How do you harness AI as a tool to help people rather than hurt them, but also to disseminate these tools to the world? And so if you're interested in learning more, Google it.
Amazing. I do think we need these tools like now more than ever before. So I really appreciate the work you're doing and I really appreciated this conversation.
Likewise. Thanks so much for having me.
That is all for this episode of the Liz Moody podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I would so appreciate if you would share it with somebody that you think would love it too. It is my goal to get as much life-changing information out to as many people as possible. And you sharing episodes with people is 100% the thing that makes that happen. I would also love to hear from you in the comments, any thoughts or questions or opinions that you have on this episode. Make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, wherever you like to listen. You can find every single discount code that you heard in this episode and tons more at lizmoody.com/codes. It is the best way to save money on amazing vetted products. Truly, our brand partners make the best products in the world. That is why they're our beloved brand partners. And it's the best way to support the show and keep it completely free for you. And we so appreciate it. Okay, I love you. And I will see you on the next episode of the Liz Moody podcast. Oh, just one more thing. It's the legal language. This podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician, a psychotherapist, or any other qualified professional.